Now, it's no secret that we here on the channel do look at quite a few Herpa Wings aircraft models, and in a way today is no different, except we are looking at a very much upgraded Herpa Wings model thanks to the work of Aviation Custom Model Designer. And what that is all about, well, we'll find out right after the drop. And with that, hello and welcome to a new episode of Review, where we today will take a closer look at an Airbus A320-200 of Atlantic Airways. Now, as we can see, this is a Herpa model, which of course is the donor model for this custom that has been modified by Aviation Custom Model Designer, which we can see here on the back side of the box where he has added his nice little sticker to it. But of course we do still have the remains of the original donor model, so we can see it is, of course, or used to be a June A320. And here she is, the Airbus A320-200 in the current standard livery of Atlantic Airways. Now, as mentioned, the donor model here is an Airbus A320 of June, made by Herpa Wings. This is the latest iteration of Herpa's A320. Personally, I prefer some of the older molds, but there is a good reason why Aviation Custom Model Designer has used the latest mold. One is, of course, availability. The other one is that it is much easier to disassemble, which can be necessary when making such custom models. But if you want to know more about his craft of making custom aircraft models, I've made an interview with him at the Aviation Fair in Amsterdam. It should pop up right now in the top right corner of your screen, or you can find a link to it in the video description below. But now let us take a closer look at the aircraft model itself to see what he has managed to do with it. On the vertical stabilizer, we have the Atlantic Airways branding. On the horizontal stabilizer, you find a bit of detailing that is a leftover of the donor model, but then underneath the aircraft as well, we find some detailing here. That is, of course, something that Aviation Custom Model Designer has added himself. On the fuselage itself, we then have the writing of Faroe Islands and the flag of the Faroe Islands. We find the full registration code of the aircraft, as well as some lovely detailing in the cabin doors. And towards the very tail of the aircraft, we find a bit of detailing around the APU exhaust. At the front of the aircraft and across the fuselage, we then have the writing of Atlantic Airways. Underneath that, we find the aircraft type specification and a plethora of small hatches, static boards, and sensors. Really lovely work here from Aviation Custom Model Designer. We do even have the addition of petro tubes around the cockpit section. A tiny little detail Herpa is always missing out on, but just adds so much to an aircraft model. Apart from that, we of course also have the cockpit windows with the window wipers printed on. So from the really highly detailed front cabin section and cockpit section, we can move on to the engine nacelles. They have been kept in white and blue, following the color scheme of Atlantic Airways, have the silver leading edge printed on, as well as the Atlantic Airways branding and safety markings, looking really rather nice. The physical detailing, that is as usual quite lovely with Herpa Wings on the A320, so no complaints here from me. Then above the wings on the fuselage, we find the emergency exits have been printed on, and that leads us straight to the wings themselves. Here we have the different flap slats and spoilers carved out quite nicely with different shades of grey for additional detailing, and we find the markings for the emergency exits. Really rather lovely. The underside of the wings has more nice physical detailing, but a really odd mistake here in the registration code. This is clearly a typo, a bit of a shame, but given the level of precision in his work, otherwise I am tempted to forgive him here, especially when looking at the wingtip fences that have been colored in not just with one color but two colors, and this is something Aviation Custom Model Designer has made himself, and just look how precisely he has painted this. Absolutely fantastic work. The landing gear, that is of course the standard landing gear that Herpa uses for all the Airbus A320 aircraft models, so no big surprise here. The main landing gear looking great, the front landing gear being massively oversized, but Aviation Custom Model Designer, unlike Herpa, has managed to add some printed details here, so that's quite lovely. On the belly of the aircraft we find more printed details, also in form of the Atlantic Airways web address or branding, whatever you want to call it. Of course, it has been impaired by this hole in the fuselage for a stand, which is not included with this aircraft model. Not with the donor model, nor of course with this custom model. A bit of a shame, but I mean obviously not the mistake of Aviation Custom Model Designer. And then finally we do have the highly detailed doors to the cargo compartments added here at the back of the aircraft, and of course also here at the front of the aircraft. So there we have it, the Airbus A320-200 in the current standard delivery of Atlantic Airways, a custom model made by Aviation Custom Model Designer based on a donor model from Herpa Wings in scale 1:500. So what can we say about this aircraft model? I mean, you will hardly find anyone who is as capable as adding these kind of decals to a donor model as smooth as he does it here. I mean, you don't see any edges, anything. This looks like as if it had been printed on. Now, of course, when we go very close to these printed decals, we can see the droplets from the print. But firstly, you do really have to get very close to actually be able to see that. Secondly, this kind of effect we have actually even seen with prints made by the manufacturer themselves, so it is not exclusive to custom models. But of course, it looks nicer when we cannot see that. On the other hand, we do get way more details on this aircraft than we would ever get from Herpa Wings, because there is no limit as to how many details you would like to print on your decals. Then, of course, there are the parts where Aviation Custom Model Designer didn't have to work with decals, but had to physically paint the model himself. I'm particularly, of course, here thinking about the wingtip fences. The craftsmanship, the precision in his work here is just outstanding. So yes, there are drawbacks with these kind of custom models, but there's certainly also a lot of benefits. Now, I don't want to hide away the fact that Aviation Custom Model Designer did make a mistake with the registration code on the underside of the wing. And you would rightly say that if this had been made by Herpa, it would be all over them. But there is a difference here, because obviously this is a mistake. But when everything else works really well, everything else is above and beyond, then I am more lenient and don't mind forgiving small mistakes here and there. This is the difference, because Herpa, when they make mistakes, they make a lot of them, and there isn't much else that can compensate for that. And on that note, it is time to end today's episode. If you have enjoyed this video, then don't forget to leave a like. If you're new around here, why not hit subscribe? With that, thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.